have no memory of this, but I've been told that when I was very young, I had a t-shirt that said, "Forget First Lady. When I grow up, I'm going to be president." Now, holding official office has never been one of my aspirations. But I'm grateful to those who were the source of that shirt, people who were willing to push boundaries, who raised their voices, telling me that I had the right to pursue whatever God gave me the ability to do, regardless of what others might say. The shirt itself was ahead of its time. I have now lived through 2 election cycles where I thought a woman might be called as president, only to discover that the same man had won instead. I wonder if that has anything to do with women's voices and leadership and power and ways of being in the world that is too intimidating. The fact that 2/3 of our pastoral staff are women is unusual in the Church of the Brethren, even though as a denomination we have been ordaining women, or saying we're willing to ordain women, since 1958. When I was younger, I had no idea how advances in equity had not been reality until a few years earlier. I was born in 1974. 2 months later, the Equal Credit Opportunity Act was enacted, ensuring that women officially could get their own lines of credit apart from a husband or father. Today, that seems unbelievable that it took until 1974 for that to be reality. And just a few years earlier, in 1968, the Fair Housing Act was passed, prohibiting discrimination in the sale and rental and financing of housing based on race, color, religion, sex, gender, familiar status, and national origin. I know some of you remember and have lived the impact of those acts. And some may have marched, written letters, or otherwise worked for their passage. Thank you. Legislation alone does not guarantee equality, equity, fairness, or justice, though it's a start. We are living in times now when civil rights established by case law are coming under renewed scrutiny. Efforts to ensure protection for people are not just the work of trailblazers in our history. They are part of our heritage and our legacy that we have to keep working to protect. Our faith calls us as people who not only care about justice, but are committed to living in a way that continues to celebrate diversity, to ensure equity, to foster inclusion, to embody belonging. Amen? We do this as part of our commitment to follow in the footsteps of Jesus, who challenged boundaries, who paid attention to those who were ignored by others. And we have to wrestle with the reality that from a Christian perspective, biblical passages and faith statements give mixed messages. Texts bound by the societal norms of the time in which they were written, like denominational statements that were bold for their time, but can seem woefully inadequate and outdated later. Many of us look to God as source of justice, who establishes what is fair, what is equitable. Psalm 99 is one of several psalms that proclaim that God judges people with fairness or equity. God is a lover of justice, it says, working to create laws that lead to well-being. The psalmist proclaims that God answers the cries of those who call out. And the image is one who is both close by and who can see from a distance. The psalmist calls for nations to offer praise, to bow before God's holy presence. But when people are victims of intolerance and violence, it is harder to feel that psalmist assurance of justice. Faith compels us to use our voices and our courage to address wrongs. When I was in Minneapolis last month, the group I was traveling with went to the site where George Floyd was killed, just a few miles away. We were there a few days before the 5th anniversary of his death. And near that site on Lakota land was the Say Their Names project. Names of those whose deaths were unjustifiably taken by law officials, both widely known and those who never made wider news, have been submitted for this ongoing installation of memorial stones. It was sobering to experience, to walk up and down the rows. Seeing and saying their names is a small piece of remembering their humanity and a commitment to work for justice. For the George Floyd Memorial, a sign stating what had happened included these words: George's story is not just one of tragedy, it's also a story of resilience and hope. His death sparked a global movement of racial justice, and millions of people took to the streets to demand change. George's name has become a rallying cry for those who believe in a better future, one where all people are treated with dignity and respect. A local movement, a ministry called the Agape Movement, was there in the neighborhood through all that time, helping to prevent further violence and riots. And they continue to work as their mission to transform street energy into community energy through advocacy, empowerment, and education. Co-founder Steve Floyd, no relation, gave our group a tour and led a session on trauma-informed care that they provide. His love for the people there leads him to keep seeking out those who are on the margins, to make sure that they're seen and heard, that their names are told and included. He is led by faith and abiding trust that God does keep working for the kind of justice that the psalm proclaims, and cares for those who have too often been unseen and unheard. For the Israelites, you can go back to the theme slide. For the Israelites who wandered in the wilderness, God was both a source of liberation and a source of fear. God provided for their needs, but there was also a sense that God would punish those who opposed God's laws. In the wilderness, there was a group led by Korah, a cousin of Moses and Aaron, who rose up against Moses' style of leadership, rebelled against God, and in that account, their efforts were stopped by the earth swallowing them up. In that account, justice came by taking them away from the picture. Their lives, their rights to pass on lineage were cut short. And sometime later, a few chapters later, the clans were counted, with inheritance of land being distributed according to the size of their clan. Reading through the names of all of these clan members in Numbers 26 can be tedious. But it includes something that is explained in Numbers 27 that disrupted the system as it had been and had effect on future generations. I invite you to hear the story of 5 young women, or possibly girls, who called for equity. the daughters of Zelophehad, son of Hepher, Gilead's grandson, Machir's great-grandson, Manasseh's great-great-grandson, belonging to the clan of Manasseh, Joseph's son, came forward. His daughters' names were Mahlah, Noah, Hoglah, Milcah, and Tirzah. They stood before Moses, Eleazar the priest, the leaders, and the entire community at the entrance to the tent of meeting. And they said, "Our father died in the wilderness. He wasn't part of the community who gathered together against the Lord in the community of Korah. He died for his own sin, and he had no sons. Why should our father's name be taken away from his clan because he had no son? Give to us property among our father's brothers." Moses took the case before God. And God said to Moses, "The daughters of Zelophehad are right in what they're saying. By all means, give them inheritance among their father's brothers. Hand over their father's inheritance to them, and speak to the Israelites. If a father dies and has no sons, you must hand over the inheritance to his daughters. If he has no daughters, then he will give the inheritance to his brothers. And if he has no brothers, you should give the inheritance to his father's brothers. And if his father has no brothers, then you should give it to the closest member of his clan, and he will take possession of it. This will be a regulation and a case law for all Israelites, just as the Lord had commanded Moses." Mahlah, Noah, Hoglah, Milcah, and Tirzah. They were not only included here and named in Numbers 26 in this great lineage, this census of clans, they are included in 3 other passages in the Bible. And in all but one, they are called not only as the daughters of Zelophehad, but by name. In a time when women were often excluded, to have them appear not just once but multiple times by name is significant. They may have been the original biblical version of say their name. And with that in mind, with them before you, will you say their names with me? Mahlah, Noah, Hoglah, Milcah, Tirzah. When they are named in Numbers 27, they are unmarried, which may indicate that they are young, maybe even girls. Their father had died, there's no mention of their mother, and they approached Moses and other leaders, the whole congregation, with every bit of courage that they could muster in their position. It wasn't fair that their fathers should be forgotten, and it wasn't fair that they should be denied an inheritance just because they were female. because Moses didn't know what to do with it. He went directly to God. And in the story, God is both near enough for conversation and understood as the final authority. God affirmed the daughters. Their courage and their presence benefited not only them, but future generations. It became law. So other daughters in their situation wouldn't have to advocate for basic rights of inheritance because of their advocacy. The law was significant, though limited. Because, as you heard, if a father had sons, the inheritance were still far away from daughters. And the law didn't extend to other female members of the family. Like laws today, people found ways to challenge freedom and rights. It didn't take long for people to complain about land that would be lost, because what if these daughters married outside the clans? Both a concern for the group and maybe some bitterness from those who didn't think that the women should inherit. And so they instituted conditions that they would have to marry within their clan, basically marrying their cousins. It's a bit like 1 or 2 steps forward and at least a half step back, but it's a start. In addition to claiming a name for themselves and those who would follow them, Mala and Noah and Hagla and Milcah and Tirzah called for justice that those who had created laws had missed. When Moses brought the case before God, God affirmed their voice. And I wonder, was God surprised by this injustice that already existed? Was it God's intent for the daughters to be the means by which greater awareness and equity would be realized? Whether we look to the Bible as a literal example to follow or as lessons bound in history and metaphor, those who are on the margins have a perspective that those in the majority need to hear. Because I don't think Moses and other leaders were intentionally unjust or cruel, but they were caught in their own blind spots and ways of being in the world. And so for us, how aware are we of inequity? How can we build on what we have learned, and what voices do we need to pay attention to? Who do we need to see and hear to help us see and hear beyond our own experiences of life? This week, our nation will celebrate freedom, Independence Day. We lift up equality as a virtue, but we are called to more than that. Raven Solomon distinguishes between equality and equity in some of the ways that Jason named during the children's time. Equality emphasizes uniformity, one size fits all, local impact, and has the unintended possibility of excluding people by ignoring their unique needs. Equity, on the other hand, gives people the support they need. It's systemic. It's long-term. It empowers individuals by recognizing their agency. Equity raises the bar for justice. It may challenge power structures and norms, but it raises our human standard and shared humanity. And in addition to the images that were shared earlier, total inclusion and belonging might be not just taking away the wooden fence that you can't see through and peering at the level that allows one to see, but actually sitting in the stands with others or even playing on the field. Yesterday, a number of us were present at Lancaster Pride, including staffing a church-sponsored table. And as I looked at the diversity of the people, I felt so grateful to be part of a gathering where each person could be exactly who they are, without fear of discrimination or judgment. Despite fears of rights being taken away or the potential of harm outside that space, I saw smiles, I heard laughter, I felt joy in this created community where people could dress as they want, be called by the names and pronouns that were right for them, to rejoice in safe and welcoming space. It was a vision of what equity can look like. From 5 women in the wilderness who dared to ask for an inheritance to our ongoing calling upon God for justice and doing our part to bring it about, we build on a legacy and a dream for how the world can be, trusting that what we do impacts those around us and those who will come after us, to the betterment of humanity. We do this as followers of Jesus, who calls us together, who challenges us to see beyond our own understandings of what we each might think justice is, what it looks like, what it sounds like, what it is called. We trust that God will see us through all that we encounter. May it be so.